Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Vallis, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of the National Academy of Social Insurance. We're so glad to have all of you here with us for today's timely and important conversation about artificial intelligence, emerging technology, and disability benefits at the Social Security Administration. And as the use and capabilities of artificial intelligence and other emerging tech have expanded, benefits tech, as it is often called, is now being utilized more by the day within the realm of social insurance. So this intersection has become a critically important new focus for the National Academy of Social Insurance's work. And one of the first forays that the Academy has made into this intersection of benefits tech and AI and social insurance is in the realm of disability benefits and AI at the Social Security Administration. And to that end, back in June 2024, so almost 1 year ago, as the Social Security Administration began expanding its use of these technologies in administering its disability programs, the Academy was thrilled to bring together a task force on AI, emerging tech, and disability benefits, bringing together a wide array of experts across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and including a range of tech leaders and innovators who have been working in this space. We're thrilled to have two of our principal investigators, our two co-principal investigators of that task force with us today for this conversation. And I just want to acknowledge them now while I say just a couple more words about the task force's work. Chantel Boyens, immediately to my left, with the Urban Institute, and Jack Smulligan, also with the Urban Institute, have been fearlessly leading the work of this task force. And it's been wonderful to work with them and this range of fantastic experts, many of whom rarely work together on one issue. And at the core of the first report that this task force has released, and it was released just about a month ago, is a set of principles and guardrails, which the task force worked together for close to a year to develop, with the goal of helping to guide and shape the Social Security Administration's approach to using artificial intelligence and other forms of emerging technology in rights impacting cases that impact who's eligible for disability benefits, to produce something of a North Star, one might call it, as the agency continues to increase its use of these types of technologies in ways that impact people with disabilities, both who are applying for and who receive disability benefits. So with that as a little bit of what this task force came together to do, and some of what it has done already that we're going to be talking about today, we've got a really phenomenal lineup for you today of experts, both our PIs who we'll be talking with this morning as something of a fireside chat, and then a range of members and co-chairs of the task force, as well as one individual who will be commenting as a discussant on the task force's report as well, to help us put all of this in context and situate it in the current moment. So I'm really excited for the range of conversations we're going to have today, and thank you for being with us for this really important set of conversations. So Jack and Chantel, to start with you and to sort of help us lay the groundwork for today's conversations with the report itself and where it came from. I mentioned you're both the co-principal investigators of this task force. And so in that role, both of you have been taking a really close look for really almost a year now at how technology and emerging technologies and artificial intelligence are being used in a whole range of benefits and social insurance contexts. And specifically, and with the greatest deep dive, how they're being used at the Social Security Administration to make decisions around who's eligible for disability benefits. So just to get us started, what can you share, and Jack, I think I'm going to start with you, about how this type of technology is currently being used at the Social Security Administration, and what you and the task force identified as some of both the opportunities and the risks.
Yeah, so to just set some context, SSA, right, there's different types of AI, and the different types have different opportunities and risks. And SSA is now using decision support algorithms, and the primary program of interest is Imagine, which converts text to data using natural language processing, and then also helps disability adjudicators with predictive analytics. So SSA is exploring, but is not extensively using the newer AI applications such as large language models and generative AI. But the creation of the task force is very much motivated by wanting to understand the implications of these newer AI applications, which are designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy. And then as you recognize, I mean, we are very much focused on rights impacting type of applications, not quite as much on customer service issues around like using AI for 800 services. And I'll turn over to Chantel and to talk a bit about the challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, so I think Jack did a good introduction there in terms of the types of technology that we're talking about and how SSA is using it. You know, we are in a broader context where, you know, the agency is facing a lot of challenges. And so our applicants and beneficiaries kind of to level set, you know, SSA has a large disability claims backlog, processing backlog. To put that in context, you know, the backlog of people waiting for a decision on claim has grown from around 500,000 back in 2017 to over 1 million now. Those are historic high number of people waiting. The amount of time people are waiting for a decision has grown from over 3.5 months in 2017 to sort of double that to over 7 months now. In addition, at the same time that we see this increase in the number of people waiting, the amount of time they need to wait in order to access benefits, the amount of work that goes into processing claims has also grown in some ways. The amount of medical evidence, for example, is a key component. There's a lot of medical evidence needed to that goes into a disability claim and that goes into the decision-making process. Dealing with thousands of pages of medical evidence is something that the agency is having to grapple with. So there are a lot of challenges in the disability determination process. So, you know, the question is, are there opportunities? How, you know, what is the agency going to do? AI and emerging tech could be part of the solution in certain ways. I think that we were really careful, and we're going to talk a lot about risks as well. But, you know, the real question is, what changes or what possibilities does the agency have to make better decisions sooner? And how can AI help with that? Is there an opportunity for AI to help organize and collect and interpret the evidence that goes into the claims to assist, you know, folks who are processing those? Can it also help identify claims that are likely to be allowed later in the process? So a lot of claims are initially denied, but a very high percentage of them are eventually approved. Could AI help us identify those cases sooner and accelerate the right decisions earlier? So I think those are some of the potential opportunities that might exist for AI to play a part in emerging tech in addressing these really big challenges that the agency is facing right now.
And just to pause you there, and then we can get into some of the risks as well, right? I just really appreciate you grounding us in some of the realities that people seeking disability benefits are facing, right? You know, some of the other numbers that are of course shocking every time they get shared, but are the reality for a lot of people who are seeking benefits that they paid for and that they rely on as protection to be there in their time of need. Is thousands of people dying every year waiting for disability benefits, right? These are not things that we think should be true of a system functioning the way we want it to, right? So definitely a lot that the Social Security Administration has identified and is currently seeking to use technology to do to address some of those challenges and to see that as an opportunity to get benefits to people when they need them, as opposed to months or years after the moment of when eligibility happens. But talk to us then next, as I think you were about to, about what some of the risks that the task force identified.
Yeah, and I think Jack was gonna talk about some of that.
Sure. I mean, there's kind of a wide range of different types of risks, and the most prominent one is for AI tools such as like a predictive algorithm to perpetuate and reinforce types of bias. I think we've seen in some commercial applications for AI where it's used for hiring decisions or for credit checks, the perpetuation of bias in those contexts. And given the pervasiveness of bias, especially for people with disabilities, I think that even given the pervasiveness, even apart from AI, it's a greater risk that AI kind of compounds and reinforces that. And I think the work that Ian Mora has done, and also reports by the National Institutes for Standards and Technology, are really helpful in terms of understanding the complexity of the types of biases. And another risk is removing human review or making the human review kind of perfunctory. So an algorithm-driven decision-making process. And here the Center for Democracy and Technology and the organization Technologic Justice have had insights in this area. And I think a related issue to think about is automation bias, where you retain a human review, but there's strong kind of cultural signals or oversight signals to defer to the AI's recommendation. And kind of yet another type of risk is disparate and inequitable impact across claimants. What if an AI tool can be quite effective for claimants with certain types of conditions, but not as effective for others? And it's very important that SSA stay vigilant in giving kind of quality service to everyone, even the ones that are easier to adjudicate because of AI, or ones that are more difficult. And there is, I mean, I think it's clear to everyone that there's a potential for a lack of transparency or explainability with AI. This is especially a concern with large language models and generative AI, and it's very concerning when we see AI applications hallucinating, and even the creators of the application can't necessarily explain why the application's doing this. And there's further risks in terms of data privacy and burden on beneficiaries. But I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, no, and so the task force, again, representing a whole range of different perspectives and kind of parts of the ecosystem, it all fed into a lot of what you guys are summarizing. So just to give credit to this amazing task force, many of whom we're going to hear from in just a moment, these were some of the risks that folks identified, right? Because yes, there are opportunities, but also we need to be really mindful of what some of the potential risks are. So all of that, I think, is a great segue into laying out the first phase of work that the task force has completed, which is to identify not just opportunities and risks, but really a very concrete set of principles and guardrails. And that was really where the task force wanted to start after its first meeting, talking about, how do we how do we examine and how do we contribute to and advise SSA on such a new set of challenges and opportunities. The group really identified, the place we need to start is to develop a framework of thinking about this that can operate sort of as a North Star, as I mentioned, and that identifies principles and guardrails for the use of AI and emerging tech in this context. And so I think that's where you guys wanted to go next, was to lay out what were those principles and guardrails that the task force identified together.
Yeah. And I'll start with principles and turn it over to Chantal for guardrails. First one is to not use AI to limit or impede the right of applicants or beneficiaries. That we want to focus on using AI to improve the disability determination process, to be able to award cases earlier, not to make the process more difficult for applicants. And the next principle is prioritizing human decision-making in the determination process. Sometimes the way this is talked about is having a human in the loop, but I think it's important to think of that as it can't just be a perfunctory role. I mean, we need to avoid the risk of automation bias, where we're deferring to the technology instead of questioning the results of the technology. And there's a risk of preventing, reducing, and there's a principle of preventing, reducing, and mitigating bias. And here I think the NIST kind of analysis here is really helpful about the need to have vigilance on detecting bias on a kind of ongoing basis, that it is not something that can be removed, but it's something that can reemerge. And also there's obviously principles of fairness and equity.
Yeah. So kind of in addition to those principles, we wanted to also dig a little bit deeper, a little bit more specifically into potential guardrails that should be put in place. And again, this report is trying to bridge worlds between AI and emerging tech and expertise in those fields and expertise in the Social Security disability programs and policies, and get those a little closer together. So we had 5 guardrails. The first one is establish internal and external governance processes for oversight of AI. So AI is more than just better tech. It really is. It really can change the structure of what's being done, a new way of operating. And so we need new ways of governing that and making decisions. And that should include both internal and external stakeholders. We think that's important and could be an important next step in terms of our work together. The second guardrail is make tools that are explainable, transparent, testable, accessible to people with disabilities, and subject to independent evaluation. So, again, AI needs to be explainable and transparent. Jack was just talking about large language models. There are cases where, when it's done well, it should be able to be unpacked and be transparent about how that works. And that's just a key tenet. AI needs, one of the guardrails we suggested was strengthening procurement policies specifically around AI. And this echoes guidance that has been given in executive orders under the past 2 administrations have emphasized the need for procurement oversight, guardrails on contractors as SSA, gets into these technologies, brings them in-house. The Center for Democracy and Technology has a lot of good work in this area as well. The fourth one is conduct ongoing monitoring and evaluation of AI applications. So, evaluation is really important to know what are the outcomes that are being generated. Are we achieving the goals? Are we making the most of the opportunities that were laid out with the application that has been invested in? And then the last thing is protect data and personal privacy. And that's obviously just a kind of a fundamental principle, but there's a lot of sensitive private information that SSA collects in these claims. And even, if those are used to train models and things like that, there needs to be really robust safeguards in place to make sure that that information is used properly.
And issues that have been getting a lot of attention in recent weeks, especially. So is there anything else either of you wants to offer in terms of sort of table setting or kind of contextualizing the report before we transition into a panel discussion? And don't worry, we're going to bring you guys back for audience Q&A. So don't worry, you're going to get a chance to ask these folks questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that, and we say this in the report, but I think kind of, again, setting the context, Jack and I did a report on customer service needs at SSA back in the fall. There are broader issues with staffing and resources, and AI and emerging tech is a tool that complements the staff that need to process claims. Resources for the agency have been an issue for many years, and it's not a one-to-one replacement. They go together, right? You need staff to ensure that AI is being deployed in a responsible way, and making the work that the agency does better, more fair, more productive, more efficient. But it's not a one-to-one substitute, and investments in technology take time to be done well and responsibly. So there's sort of a need to transition, and build in that transition time as you're you're really integrating these tools into a policy process or programs, and that's important to keep in mind.
And a lot of what the task force is going to be thinking about, I think, in its next phase of work as well, right? Given the moment that we find ourselves in, a lot of conversation, and the Academy has hosted conversations on the customer service crisis at the agency, right? And there's a lot swirling in that space. So not necessarily what we're going to be talking about in depth today, but a really important thing to note to just connect those conversations, right? There is a lot of discussion of AI as sort of the solution to the customer service crisis, but I think you're saying, Chantel, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
So lots more where this came from. And like I said, these folks aren't going away. We're going to bring them back for audience questions. So if you've got questions for Jack and Chantel, please hold them for the end. But what we're going to do now is we're going to transition to a conversation with several of the co-chairs and task force members, and also a brilliant expert who's going to join and round out our panel as well, to discuss the report and to pull in some of the threads that Jack and Chantel have offered. So quick break. We'll be right back. And thank you so much to both of you for all of your leadership of this important work.
Thank you.
Mhm. And at this point, I think we're going to go ahead and welcome back or welcome on to the virtual stage our wonderful panel. And I'll go ahead and introduce them while we've got all of their cameras coming back on. We're thrilled to be joined by Henry Claypool, who is one of the co-chairs of the task force. He's also with the American Association of People with Disabilities. Jen Burdick is also one of our co-chairs of the task force, and she leads the SSI unit at Community Legal Services in Philadelphia, an organization I have a lot of love for because that's where I got my start in doing this work, learned everything I know about these issues. We're thrilled to be joined by Darren Webb, who's also a member of the task force and is the founder and the chief executive officer of Mindset Care. Tim Shaw, we're thrilled to have as a member of the task force as well. And joining us today, Tim is the director of the Benefits Transformation Initiative at the Aspen Institute's Financial Security Program. And then we're also thrilled to be joined by Kevin DeLebon, who is the founder of Tectonic Justice. And Kevin, I'm so glad you were able to join us. Your work has been really important to this task force. And as you heard Jack just mention you, it gets cited in the report, really foundational and important for the work that this group has done. So just to get started, I'm going to give each of you a chance in sort of a lightning round to just share what you see as one key takeaway from the task force's report, and then we'll get into a lot more of the meat. And Tim, I'm going to go to you first.
Happy to. And thanks for having me. I'd say like the top line for me, which came out a little bit in this discussion, is to keep the goal when deploying AI. We work with a number of state executives on how to improve benefits delivery across public benefit programs. And we can get trapped in these conversations about how exciting AI is or how scary AI is, about what its impact will be on these systems. But for us, we should make sure people can apply it quickly, that their applications are processed accurately, they hear back quickly, they have received the benefits when they need it, and they have a dignified experience. And making that the lens through, are you going to deploy AI or not? Is this an AI problem? Helps get past the problem where you are either deploying AI for AI's sake or fighting AI for AI's sake. When really what we need to do is center the people who need to get those benefits to build their own financial security and catch them when they fall off the economic ladder.
I really appreciate you starting us there, right? Offering that North Star and helping us ground in that as we think about what we're trying to do here. Henry, with that, I'm going to go to you next. What do you see as one key takeaway from the task force's first report?
Sure. I think one central piece is to ensure that AI use remains human-centered. And, you know, the report touches on a number of steps, as does a report that we issued with the Center for Democracy and Technology on creating a disability inclusive AI ecosystem, and really involving stakeholders in a number of processes that ensure that that kind of human-centeredness is there when the decision is being made. The technology is very robust, and these decisions can be made by machines, and they might not always have the best of outcomes, but with keeping that human-centered and the folks working at the agencies being diligent about this decision-making, I think we have a better chance of ensuring that they are accurate and timely.
Thank you so much for that, Henry. And I appreciate you mentioning some of the work that you've done with the Center for Democracy and Technology. I know we'll get into that as well in more depth. It's also been important for this task force's work. Jen, I'm going to go to you next. What do you see as one top takeaway from this first report, and also from your position as one of the co-chairs of this work?
Thank you, Rebecca. One of the top takeaways I have from this work is that it's important to be thoughtful about the use of AI AI has a lot of potential, but I think it's important that we don't get greedy, right? You can really speed up disability claims, for example, by having AI help identify people who are obviously eligible and just push those claims through. But under the policies that exist today, AI should never be used to deny someone without human review. You know, disability is complicated. Even if things don't seem obvious, that's when you really need a person to get in there. So I think, you know, really focusing on using AI thoughtfully, I think there's a lot of opportunities there, as long as we're very careful about not using it to problematically impact rights.
Thank you for that, Jen, and a lot more that we'll have you get into as well from your perspective, representing people who are seeking disability benefits, many of whom get wrongfully denied. I'm going to go to you next, Darren. It's been wonderful having you as part of this task force, given your work as a tech innovator, and you'll talk more about that as well, given your work with Mindset Care. But just to kick us off for this lightning round, what do you see as a key takeaway for you from this first phase of work?
Yeah, definitely. One of the guardrails just around mitigating bias and definitely around AI implementation. AI consumes a lot of data, and even here at Mindset, we see multiple claims with the same disabilities, claimants the same age, same comorbidities, same diagnoses, and wildly different outcomes. And there is some bias in that. So just understanding, being able to possibly label the data, being able to understand that AI will give an output with some form of bias, and then going back to figure out and labeling that data could help to, of sorts mitigate that. I think that's just something that's going to be, something that I've been thinking out a lot, and us at Mindset. Moving forward. So I think that was a great part of what we're working on.
That's great. And yeah, a lot more there. And they're off camera, so I'll out them that you're getting a lot of head nodding from Jack and Chantel, who agree with you on that point, especially as folks who think a lot about evaluation. And I know we'll talk more about that. And Kevin, last but certainly not least, but I'm really excited to have you as part of this conversation today. You are not a member of the task force, but as I mentioned, your work has really been important to this task force's thinking and landscaping. And you are the founder of Tectonic Justice. So we're really glad to have you weighing in today and helping to bring this conversation into connection to a lot of the work you've been leading on these issues and related issues. What's one key takeaway for you from the first work that the task force has done?
Yeah, happy to be here. And you also left me the hardest thing, which is following 5 other smart people with one takeaway. So I'll go a little bit into the nitty-gritty. I mean, obviously the report, I think, does a good job of navigating a lot of the tensions and the complex situations in which people are considering and deploying AI. I think what's interesting, and this might be in subtext, is how carefully Social Security is really trying not to have its AI crossover into the decision-making realm, right? It's doing everything it can, and I'm a former practitioner of helping people get Social Security benefits. They're doing everything they can to say, no, we're not making a decision with AI, but they're doing a lot of stuff that's really close to that point, right? Like the Imagen system of like recording and annotating medical records. Like anybody who's practiced in this knows that so much of the work is going through medical records and drawing out evidence that Social Security's team missed along the way, right? And like contextualizing it and making it make sense. And like AI systems are doing that. So it's not directly making the decision, but it's informing the decision. And it seems like SSA is being very thoughtful. Thoughtful is too complimentary. I think they're being very intentional in trying to draw that line. And even though they've done that, they haven't supplied any data on its efficacy. I assume that would have been in the report. I've attended their webinars and other things, and they haven't done a lot of revealing of the internal data to show how is this working. They haven't opened it up to advocates to say, how could this be going wrong? Is it reading the medical records correctly? Is it correctly identifying the compassionate allowance cases? Is it, not forcing judge review on cases that are, affirmances? Like all of those considerations, I think, are an interesting aspect of the report.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, Kevin. And I feel like a lot of what you just threw in really connects to some of the principles and guardrails that you heard Jack and Chantel talking about, right? That need for transparency, for example, right? So that there is awareness around how things are working, but also numbers that tell the story, right? I just appreciate so much of what you just said. So now getting into more of a panel discussion. Thank you for bearing with me in a quick lightning round, and Kevin for being the last one to go after lots of people had already offered key takeaways. Henry, I'm going to go to you next because you, as you alluded to, have been doing just an immense amount of work in recent years at the intersection of technology and AI as part of that, and disability rights specifically. You mentioned a report that you worked on with another member of the task force, actually, Ariana Abulafia at the Center for Democracy and Technology. That report is called Building a Disability Inclusive AI Ecosystem. And I think a link to that is probably going to get included in the chat at some point so folks can find it. Talk a little bit about how AI has been showing up in rights impacting contexts that impact disability rights specifically, so that we can maybe have a little bit of that zoom out as we think about what lessons the Social Security Administration can learn from how these tools have been used in other contexts, specifically impacting disabled people.
Yeah, I think much of the work that goes into building this disability inclusive AI ecosystem is drawn from our experience in the context of other benefits determinations made at the state level that Kevin has been involved in for years. We drew on work that was done in the employment sector to really inform this. And there we've seen AI systems that really prevent people from actually getting hired or even interviewed for a job. And so, you know, in the healthcare arena, AI's use is a kind of questionable on its impact, screens out disability often, and doesn't allow people to be considered for certain benefits. So, you know, I think we went about organizing an ecosystem and suggesting what the various stakeholders, the roles that they might play. Those a little more specifically, we really wanted the disability rights and kind of justice advocates to be involved with the people that were either claimants for Social Security benefits or beneficiaries, monitoring how they were, you know, were their benefits being adjusted when these tools were being used, but also leaning into some of the work that Kevin has been doing, really suggesting that the legal aid folks like Jen link up with benefits tech and the work that Kevin does, so that there is a real opportunity to become informed about how AI use is impacting people in this process, so they can have an advocate along the way. And then we went into a series of steps that the agency should take, which I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to take all the time on your panel.
No, I appreciate that, Henry. And the report is well worth reading. Folks should explore that. And I'm curious if there's anything you want to say about any of the other benefits contexts where AI has been used, Medicaid, long-term care, and so forth, where we might be able to learn what to do or what not to do as SSA considers scaling up its use of these technologies.
I think we're still, you know, adjusting to how states are using artificial intelligence in one area specifically, the area of long-term services and supports and assessments for Medicaid benefits for people with significant disabilities that want to live in the community. They need a robust set of services and supports, and an algorithm that isn't sensitive to their actual needs. You know, they've been demonstrated by Kevin and others to trim these benefits in ways that really compromise these folks' rights to live in the community. Under a Supreme Court decision, it's been made clear that, you know, we'd really like to have people integrated into the community. And the Medicaid program is trying to do that. And when states use these tools to do these assessments, they can work at cross purposes with that ultimate goal of serving people in the community. That's one good, solid example.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and a lot more we can get into and maybe will. But Kevin, since Henry named you, I'm going to go back next to you. You are definitely more focused on the risks side of the equation when it comes to how we should be thinking about how AI plays out for, or could play out for, marginalized folks and especially people with disabilities. Would love to hear you weigh in a little bit, adding to what Henry's already offered when it comes to what you see as some of the risks and with some of the benefit of having seen some of those other use cases as well.
Yeah, I mean, I am not at all sanguine. So my shorthand for this is like AI means oh no for low income people. Like that's the basic takeaway. Like in all aspects where this technology has been deployed, for decision-making purposes at least, it's resulted in lost benefits, false accusations of fraud, terminations left and right. And these are all things like mass devastation at a scale that is just really hard to fathom if you don't see it firsthand. So I'm not at all sanguine on this stuff. I think there are some non-decisional uses of AI that might be help with efficiencies if they're overseen properly, tested, vetted, the whole thing, right? Like there's a whole thing you can go through. But once you get to that decision point, I think it's just all bad news for low-income people. And I think this would be a bigger picture critique I have of the whole discourse around AI and guardrails, is that people assume that this is just like a neutral technology and that there are, good faith people who are seriously minded, trying to work through a set of technical and social challenges. Nah, that's not what this is about. This is about a way to restrict benefit access, to make poor people poorer, to give employers more power over their workers, to give landlords more power over their tenants, to give government officials ways to enact benefit cuts, to promote austerity-based policies. That's what's really happening here. And I think that's the naive assumption that most people engaging in the guardrail discourse believe. And if we need more proof, like in normal times, like pre-Trump, that was the case. But Trump, this is masks off, right? This is masks off. We have a reporter that's on here, Natalie Alms, who recently did a piece on like the phone fraud detection AI that Musk and Doge put into effect at Social Security. Totally unvetted, hurts people left and right. It doesn't matter. These are not serious people. This is not a good faith effort. This is a political project being enacted through AI. And I think if there would be one kind of takeaway from our discussion, I would love that people get is to think a little bit more about that this is not the narrow kind of fix technical problems in a good faith way. There are plenty of people in agencies that want to do that. It's just that they have less power than kind of the people who are deciding the political uses of this, which is all bad.
I appreciate that, Kevin, and appreciate your candor and also, returning to some of what you said about there being that key moment, which is the decision-making moment, right? That I think you're in agreement with Jen, and I think everybody who's been involved with the task force that it should be humans making the decisions, right? And that if AI is going to be supporting that's a thing to maintain. Definitely one of the principles and guardrails I think that came through loud and clear in this report, hearing the rest of your critique as well. Tim, I want to go to you next because you're a little bit more, it might be fair to call you a little bit more of an optimist when it comes to some of the opportunities side of the equation with AI and benefits administration. And I'm thinking especially about some work that the Aspen Institute leads through the Financial Security Program, which is where you have your home at Aspen. And that is a cohort of state benefits executives. And I've had the privilege of getting to actually meet a lot of the folks involved with that cohort. Tell us a little bit about that work and some of what you've been learning from it about how technology can be used to make benefits administration more efficient, effective, to actually get people the benefits they need when they need them. Sort of the, when it's done right side of the equation. And I'm curious if you could maybe share some of that in the context of what it actually looks like to get quote unquote government efficiency right on these issues in a way that centers people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do think you have pegged me correctly, that I'm probably one of the people in the discourse that Kevin is mad at, but that's okay. We can have a good conversation here on this panel. So we, as you mentioned, we run a leadership cohort of leading state benefits executives. These are secretaries of Health and Human Services and Labor, of directors who are leading SNAP programs from a bipartisan set of states, over a dozen states who join this cohort. And they're all, to a person, the reason they're a part of this is they are interested in making sure that as they deliver the millions of dollars and billions of dollars in benefits that their agencies are responsible for, that they do that well. And I think it's important to give a lens of what their work looks like and why we're going to see AI deployed because of the challenges in administration, just period. We had one state member who was describing their own caseload challenges and the long backlog, and was very attentive to the frontline workers in her state. And she said, look, 75% of my caseworkers have been on the job for a year, and I need to double my caseworker load, right? And so caseworkers over time, this is true in state programs. I'm sure certainly it's true in the federal level as well, in other programs. Their caseloads have only increased over time. And so one of the things that I think is really important is those folks have to make trade-offs. They're in a labor market where they can't fill caseworker jobs. People are leaving all the time. And when you're talking about deploying AI to make these processes more efficient, a big question is, what are the outcomes compared to what is happening now, not just in general, right? And so is the current system run primarily by just caseworkers working out well for people? And one of my learnings from this task force is it's not, right? There's a ton of problems with the existing system. And the way to get past that, to go to a lesson learned, is a call out that Henry made earlier, which is human-centered design. And when I say human-centered design, what I don't mean is just like have a task force like ours, even though we're really important, to come ask us what we think about how to use AI. What I mean is when you deploy a tool, or before you deploy a tool, go watch someone use it. Like, it's important that the person who's designing it go take a look. Where's the caseworker experiencing problems? If it's beneficiary facing, can you watch them do the application in their context, not in some lab, and see, are they getting through the system or not? Is it achieving the goals you're asking for or not? And then to actually implement that, I think a big thing is, and again, this is in the report, procurement is a huge lever to making sure that happens. That will not happen if you don't hold your vendors accountable for doing those things. So this isn't just the agency needs to decide, and the head of the agency needs to decide that these are the things that we're going for. And then everyone just like follows and trusts that they're going to do it. No, in the contracting language for the vendor, you ask them, how are you going to do human-centered design? How are you going to set up these guardrails that we've set as an agency? What are the checks you're going to make? Are you going to make sure that we can see how determinations are made? How are you collecting the data so you can check it afterwards? Like, all of that needs to be packaged not into just leadership principles, but in the actual business operations of deploying a system like this. And again, I'll just come back to, these systems are inevitable. And I appreciate like that there are policymakers who don't share the same goals that I do. But like, again, I spent a long time last week. We just had an in-person convening with 9 states and executives, and none of those people are trying to create an austerity state. They're just not, and they weren't before the Trump administration, and they're not now. Some are, and in that case, we should probably fight on policy and not technology. But there are real things we can do to actually improve the systems and deliver better for people.
So I think we could have structured today's event as just a debate between you and Kevin. We didn't, and so we're gonna keep bringing in some other perspectives. But Kevin, we are going to come back to you. We are going to give you a chance to respond. So Jen, I want to go to you next, because we've heard a couple of times now centering people, right? Centering claimants, centering beneficiaries. A big part of what you and the team at Community Legal Services and a whole nationwide network of legal aid advocates advocates that you all help to lead and spearhead, a big part of what you all do is often to advise the Social Security Administration on what is that experience that you see your clients moving through and provide that on the ground perspective. So I'd love to give you a chance to kind of talk next about from that centering the claimant, centering the beneficiary perspective, how would you like to see artificial intelligence and emerging tech utilized to improve access to these programs, right? With that as a goal. And again, if we were operating in the place of what does it look like to get it right here? Would love to give you a chance to speak a little bit to that.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to agree with everyone, including Kevin, that I do not think access here is decision-making, particularly denials, right? I do not think AI should be there.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of potential in AI helping adjudicators come up with fully worked claims. So when I help people apply for disability, or a lot of people have actually applied before they come to us and been denied once or twice. And one of the big issues is often that they have more treating providers than SSA knew about or they got the records for, right? So one of the things that I see as a huge potential is because they already are using AI to scan records, instead of really analyzing the records, which I think I agree with Kevin gets into fishier areas, you know, for substantive like eligibility, analyzing them to be like, did this person also go to the ER when they had whatever issue, if they had a car accident, or if they're going in for fibromyalgia, like, are there other providers listed there that for whatever reason Social Security didn't get, so that they can get all the evidence they need, so adjudicators are in a better position to earlier in the process make a decision. Because it's always very sad to me when somebody has applied and maybe been denied twice, and then we're going to a hearing almost 2 years later, and really, had this one piece of evidence been collected, everything would have been different. So I think there's a lot of potential there. But when you're talking specifically about claimant access, I know some things I don't want to see. For example, something we've been seeing this week is Social Security rolled out a new phone system with an AI thing, not a chat box, but that's operating the phone system. And so it answers the call and is asking you what you need. And this AI system, as far as I can tell, doesn't understand what you say. You ask for agent, it'll take 10 or 12 times for them to connect you to a person. When I gave it other terms that are very Social Security specific, which should be the thing that the AI phone service for Social Security knows, like cessation, they start telling me about railroad benefits, which is like terminating benefits. If I say my benefits have been reduced, they're talking to me about like spousal benefits. I don't even know. And the reason I bring this up is we've seen in this clunky use of AI that was public facing. This is something that my clients are going to be interacting with, is not working. It's not creating access. Instead, it's limiting access because people are getting frustrated. They're hanging up the phone. People I've worked with have been asking for interpreters. They're not bringing an interpreter to the phone. So this kind of goes back that there may be potential for AI, but it needs to be thoughtful. It needs to be effective. I think, Tim, you were talking about it needs to be monitored and tested. I don't know what happened with this AI machine, but it clearly was not tested, because if any AI machine in the world knows the words termination, suspension, or reduction, it should be this one, and it doesn't, right? This AI machine needs to go back to school. But so when thinking about access, we need AI that's actually well tailored, not just to understand the system that it's operating, but also how people will be coming in, which is hard because disability is complicated and you're going to have people bringing in all sorts of terms and lived experience and need interpreters or need assistance. And so, although I'm optimistic that there are some potential uses for efficiency, when it comes to access for the public, this week in particular, I'm a little disappointed.
Appreciate that, Jen. And a lot of head nodding on the panel as you were sharing, I think, what a lot of people have been experiencing this week with the rollout of that AI phone system. And the Washington Post just ran a story. I think reporters are starting to call in and have similar experiences and going, wow, what is happening here? So I really appreciate you bringing that in, even if that wasn't quite what the task force looked at, given that this is another angle, but definitely important and related. Darren, last but certainly not least, I want to bring you in here because Jen mentioned the possibility of, and this is a technical term, but very important within this context, fully worked claims, right? AI, emerging tech supporting claimants, supporting advocates in making sure that when claim for disability benefits is submitted, it has all the medical records, or helping SSA get all of the medical records so that people are approved when they're eligible instead of being wrongfully denied because the medical records aren't in, right? Really important, something I definitely saw firsthand when I was representing people, right? The difference between the person who has the file that looks like this and the person who has the file that looks like this, even if they have the same conditions. You, as the founder of Mindset Care, and really as a tech innovator who's been trying to use your company to increase access to these benefits, have been testing a lot of these kinds of tools to see how they can be used in precisely those kinds of ways. Talk a little bit about how Mindset has been putting tech and AI to use to help increase access to benefits, and anything you see in terms of advice or learnings for the Social Security Administration when it comes to the good kind of government efficiency. I put in scare quotes, getting people benefits when they need them most.
Yeah, no, for sure. When it comes to having a fully worked claim, especially at the initial stage, just our ability, once we get the claimant's information for auto fax requests to go out to providers, we're tapped into APIs, application programming interfaces of large health systems to get access to medical records immediately, and to get those included in those initial applications. Obviously, we know still to this day, the majority of initial applications are denied, and we continue to push that process out through the recon and the appeal stage. We just had a hearing last week where we were waiting on medical records for weeks and weeks and weeks. We went in front of the ALJ on a Wednesday, 3,000 medical records came in on Monday, and without AI, our case manager team would not have been able to analyze those medical records that came in. It surfaced highlights. We were able to go in front of the judge and get, the judge didn't even know about it, right? We submitted it in time. He didn't have time to go through all of that. So what would have that done should we not been able to get that? The judge would have said, hey, all right, I'm going to allow you to go get information after this claim here. We'll give you 2 months. What you're doing is you're pushing off the inevitable and wasting a lot of time there. We've solved internally at our small scale the customer service problem. We don't have an issue of claimants wanting to know where their claim is in the process. If you've ever ordered a pizza from Papa John's or Domino's, you see the pizza tracker. Where's your pizza? Is it in the box? Is it on the way to you? That's what we've done for disability benefits. We know, when the claimant knows when they log into their profile, they see where in the process their disability application is at all times. The ability to get automated messaging, pulling information down from ERE and giving that information to the claimant. So I think Social Security can be so much more clear and upfront with the claimant as far as the status of their claims. I'd say 95% of our inbound messages and emails and calls are strictly what's the status of my claim, which really frustrates claimants. Are calling and waiting on the phone for 45 minutes. I think that's been definitely a plus positive for the experience of claimants involved. Surfacing information is big. Obviously, I don't think AI is the boogeyman here. Obviously, who uses it and deploys it is half of that. But I'm seeing too much good work happening on a daily basis with how we've deployed it and the ability to surface and bubble up information that's important for claims.
And a big part I know of what you've been innovating around is exactly what Jen was speaking about, getting medical evidence on the front end, right? So that people have a much more substantial chance of being approved at that initial stage instead of having to fight their way through appeal after appeal after appeal. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add specifically on that point, given that I know Jen was surfacing kind of a wish list and you actually have identified some of how to do that.
Yeah, it's very disparate. We're still building out every day. I think we're getting better and better at being able to contact and stay in touch with all of these larger health systems. You know, not someone has multiple health issues over years. We go back, over a decade for these health records. Social Security, they do need to make it a bit easier to tap into their system to deliver information. I think that would help a lot. And yeah, I think that's what that seems.
And a lot more that I'm excited that the Academy is getting to work on with you and also with Community Legal Services and others around also increasing access on the front end, right? Using technology to make it easier to apply, right? Which is a whole other kettle of fish that I know the task force is looking forward to getting into in its next phase of work, right? Having to work through a 20, 30 page application full of legalese and having to submit it, right? Without it being digitized, right? Something that can be a barrier itself that we don't have time to talk about today. So we're going to transition in just a moment to taking some questions from the audience, and I'm seeing that they're starting to come in. So folks who are with us watching today, please feel free to submit your questions using that Q&A box, and I'm seeing them start to come in. But one thing that I'm going to come back to before we do that is to say, Tim, you are also associated with, you're actually on the advisory committee of the Center for Public Sector AI, CPSAI as it's called. And a big focus for that very new organization is kind of getting it right in how we use these tools, right? Learning lessons of what not to do, some of what Kevin was speaking about before, right? So that we can avoid those pitfalls and setting up those guardrails. I'm curious if you want to share anything from that coalition or from that work, and specifically what the bringing people together across states has started to yield in terms of like what does ethical AI look like in the benefits context. And then Kevin, we're going to come back to you.
Yeah, happy to. So again, I'm on the advisory committee for the Center for Public Sector AI, and they were pulled together for the same reason that my organization started working on AI, which is that a bunch of HHS secretaries came together and were like, we have these workforce problems, we have these backlog problems, and AI is being pitched to us all the time, and we don't know how to build appropriate guardrails and how to know whether this can deliver or not. And so CPSAI was started to convene both of those folks with pro-social and civic technologists around what are the right guardrails? How do you equip leaders to actually evaluate a piece of AI technology to see whether it does follow principles like the ones released in our task force report or not? I would encourage folks to go to their website, and an upshot of that was they released an evaluation guide for health and human services agencies. And some of it comes back to, are you actually doing the things that we have talked about throughout this? Are you, again, asking about how are they addressing the possible bias in their systems when someone is selling you a tool, and are you evaluating it? Do you have control over the data? Are you testing it? And with that, there are some things that have come out that you can see are working quite well, and also that work in ways that you couldn't do with a human. There were, for example, language access to applications and to calling in. Again, if you test it appropriately, has actually been quite good in some cases for increasing access to benefit applications in the safety net. Again, if trained appropriately, I see Kevin, yeah, I'm sure you'll have a chance to respond. You should not do what we have all been talking about, which is release a chatbot online with no testing, without calling yourself and seeing. But there was a case of someone had set up a chatbot to discuss how to get through a SNAP application, which is unnecessarily difficult in a lot of places. Someone had obviously didn't know English and started typing in their native language, which was Haitian Creole. So they started doing this. This bot had not been trained on that language, but recognized what they were trying to put in, and then immediately and seamlessly switched over and got them to a resolution on their claim. Got them through the process without sharing a common language, without being trained on that. Now, Do I think we should have that system be set up for all English speakers when we have perfectly capable people to be on the line in a call center? No, but I'm half Vietnamese, for instance. And I know if family members of mine who didn't know English called into any of these call centers in the United States and didn't know English, we could not possibly forward them to a translator of Vietnamese, right? That would not be possible. And so where there are these cases where there truly is a barrier access that technology can fill, we should do it, again, with the proper testing to make sure people aren't being tricked, they're not using bad data, and it's not being abused to cut people off.
Mhm. Now, Kevin, I'm going to give you a chance just to weigh in because I am aware that I think you have some views, and a question has come in that I think that you may want to speak to. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite our principal investigators to come kind of rejoin us in the blue chairs. We're going to segue into audience Q&A, and I'm going to give you the first question, which is going to give you a chance to speak a little bit to both this question and also to respond to some of what's come up. So I'm going to ask you guys to come join us over here. I'm going to do the same thing and take my blue chair again. Perfect. Great. So Kevin, first question to you, which I think you'll be able to take where you'd like it to go. Some of the risks, I know you have no challenge doing that. Some of the risks of AI, this questioner asks, include the consolidation and organization of large reams of cross-domain data. As we have learned from the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE's actions with SSA, restricted access government data is not necessarily going to remain protected. How can governments insulate these databases from these types of violations? So feel free to take that first one and to do any responding you'd like.
Sure. And I mean, I'm not an expert on the inside of, agency data management practices, so I probably can't give very specific examples, but I think what DOGE is showing is that you can't. Right, is that they've gone and gotten access to all sorts of data that all sorts of people have said has been illegally obtained, right, using for nefarious purposes, and are going to run with it. And that, I think, bespeaks like my bigger point about the weaponization of AI, is that there are plenty of good faith people, right, who are trying to use it. Many of the folks that Tim are talking to, many of the people I know, I mean, I think one of the greatest public servants I know is an SSA field worker, right? Like, it's not that everybody is evil, but there are some complicated dynamics. So one, you have to anticipate where it's weaponized, because it is. I mean, the noted bleeding heart liberal Ron DeSantis said that Florida's unemployment system had to be built intentionally to keep people from getting benefits because it was so bad. Like, it was not possible to explain it any other way. So you've got to account for weaponization and everything. And now we have a federal government that wants to weaponize everything, and plenty of state governments that want to weaponize everything. Where you have good faith actors, though, you have broken accountability mechanisms that mean that whatever promise the non-decision making AI has, the efficiency gaining AI, that kind of stuff, is always going to be compromised and limited, because you have political actors who don't get punished when AI goes wrong. You have market accountability that doesn't work because there are few government vendors that keep getting the same contracts. And you have limited legal liability in all these fronts. So even where there's good faith, broken accountability means that it leads to bad outcomes. There's just no incentives to get it right. And then you have to contemplate the bad faith stuff, the weaponization against both claimants and also agencies. And this is one thing we haven't heard discussed so much, is that the efficiency gains that AI can produce for agencies aren't guaranteed to go back to worker capacity. That is also a justification to then cut the workers themselves, right? And I think that's, anybody who denies that that's a political possibility, especially in this day and age, is just willfully naive. So I think those are some of the dynamics that this question brings up, and like broader responses to Tim. And Tim, I'm not calling you willfully naive at all. I don't know you. I wouldn't say that about you. But I just mean, I've had a lot of these conversations with a lot of people in very similar contexts, and this is where those kind of threads end up always going.
Yeah, and important points that you're making about accountability mechanisms, right? And so I'd love to give Jack and Chantel and also maybe Henry the chance to weigh in on what does governance, what does accountability need to look like on this stuff, and evaluation and monitoring, which has come up as well, right? So that feels like a good place to go as well. And then we have a couple of other questions. So Henry, I don't know if you want to take that first since you've been giving this a lot of thought, and then I'll give the chance to weigh in if you'd like it.
Sure, I think, we've mentioned, or I've mentioned the kind of intensive stakeholder engagement, but the agency really needs to ensure it's implementing robust pre-deployment auditing and testing of its algorithmic systems to identify and address the potential risk to people. All of this needs to be done, and the results need to be documented and shared with the public. Of course, all of this needs to happen before the system is being put to use. So that's an important step. I think the agency we've mentioned procurement. There are definitely some steps that agencies can take in that regard to make sure that they're buying the right equipment and subjecting the technology to the same type of intensive analysis before it's being deployed in a benefits determination process. Another piece of this overall equation is ensuring that an agency process for algorithmic systems includes a post-award vendor monitoring and public transparency and oversight process so that the AI system is really being monitored not only at the beginning, but as it's being used, as it evolves, because these things can be adjusted and refined at any point. And that initial stage of testing may not be appropriate any longer. So there are, and to do this, I think an important point that Kevin was making earlier about staff and staffing issues here is when the agency is already going through reduction of staff and reduction of force exercise, and we're seeing the cuts being made in the personnel, we really have to be wondering who is going to be engaged? What are the staff that are going to be responsible for conducting this process? And I think that's one of our biggest questions right now is who at the agency is going to be responsible for carrying this out? We haven't had the engagement process yet to get to know these individuals and to learn about their backgrounds. So these are all steps that I think need to be taken, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to work with SSA under the new leadership.
Yeah, great points, Henry. And a lot of what I think this task force is hoping to do in this next chapter, given the transition that's happened since its first phase of work, and really important points also just to contextualize the moment that we're in, given that we have seen thousands of staff reduced at SSA and potentially thousands more coming because of some of the Schedule PC, formerly known as Schedule F, changes that are underway. Does either of you, Chantel or Jack, want to add anything to what Henry just laid out on that governance accountability piece?
I mean, I can start.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of things come to mind when we hearing all of this. Clearly, there's a lot of well-founded skepticism, not just skepticism, but harm that's been done by the use of AI in public benefits. So when I think about governance, and I think about SSA, the agency's perspective, it just underscores how important it is to have not only strong internal governance, that's a huge question in of itself, but external and to build trust. And also, and one of the things that the agencies are supposed to do is just start with an inventory and a use case list. What gets onto the list and what doesn't is just a huge part of the decision making that happens at SSA. How much of its resources is it going to use to invest in different AI technologies and for which use cases? having external input on that and governance structure and making those decisions seems really important. And then the independent evaluation, I think a lot about evaluation is one of the key ways to show, to demonstrate whether or not the the technology is trustworthy. And in the disability context specifically, I think about, we've been talking about making the right decision earlier. That means looking at ultimate allowance rates, the percentage of claims that are approved. How does that change over time? We really have to keep our eye on that's a really key metric that's going to tell us relative to baseline. I think about baselines as a budgeteer, but relative to current, where is it going? What is how is this affecting access and use of the program? And so just those are some key things that come to my mind, especially hearing the panel talk about these issues. So.
And Jack, I think you may have more to add. I'll also just acknowledge, because Chantel just sort of alluded to this, right? There has been also a shift in the legal landscape since the transition between the prior administration and the current administration, which is worth acknowledging, around the repeal of prior executive orders that related to AI, the creation of new executive orders on AI, and we're also seeing a question on what that might mean for the Social Security Administration in this context. That's related to another question that's come in around whether agencies should even be implementing AI at all without robust statutory legal guidance along the lines of what you guys are speaking to. So just throwing that in as you continue to answer this stream of questions.
Well, just to comment on the recent AI,
Yeah.
I mean, and certainly, it was disappointing to see some of the Biden administration executive orders rescinded, but the new orders that have come out, I think, show that there's fair amount of common ground between the administrations. And so I think there is potential there. Many of the fundamental kind of principles, have similarities. And so I think we see promise, and certainly the new commissioner, there's a lot of attention on this. And so we want to work with the agency to try to pursue that.
So another question that's come in is what, and I think Darren, this is heavily for you, but others may want to weigh in as well. What technical capacity does the Social Security Administration have to do medical records analysis? Actually, that piece may be more for Jack, and then I think we can throw this next piece to you, Darren. So what technical capacity does the SSA have to do medical records analysis? That's Imagine, and I think you can talk more about that, Jack. What do we know about how these systems work, if not their efficacy? And then a second question that is in this same questioner stream will be for Darren. Darren, what have you learned about how to submit effective applications from a technical standpoint beyond standard best practices? And that person says, thank you for your insights from Mindset Care. So Jack, I think first to you on Imagine.
I think just sort of putting Imagine aside and say what's sort of the future potentially with generative AI. You don't need to train a new application on the internet. You can train it on a dedicated, limited set of evidence. And so, say in terms of the medical evidence, you can train an AI application on all of the rigorous health research related to various medical conditions. And so that AI has digested everything that's ever been written. And an examiner obviously cannot do that, but then it can take that context and look at the medical evidence and provide feedback to the disability examiner. So I think that kind of large language model ability to absorb data, but in a constrained way, not searching the internet for just any kind of tweet or whatever, but rigorous medical evidence, I think is a potential that I think it has potential for SSA in terms of improving the determination process.
Anything you want to add to the stream of questions, Chantel?
No, just as Jack is talking, I'm just thinking about, again, I just underscoring that point though, that staff need to use these tools, right? And in some ways, we're adding on analytical capability because there are increasing numbers of cases, and I'm thinking more broadly about other programs as well, but also increasing complexity. So we need the staff. And we need the staff to have better tools to deal with new problems that have emerged in the disability determination process.
So that humans can make decisions.
And better decisions.
A theme that we've heard. So then I think we're running just a couple minutes over because we got started a couple minutes late, but we have, I think, time for maybe one or two more questions. One question that has come through is, what are the next steps for the task force? This is its first phase of work that's been completed, and a first report, which is principles and guardrails. And again, I'll refer folks who are watching to that report for a lot more discussion about a lot of these different issues, including discussion of how these tools are currently being used. But the task force is about to begin its next phase of work, and actually is going to begin that work in June, just 1 year after it launched. So I'm curious if either of you wants to weigh in on some of the directions the task force's next phase of work is going to take, and whether any of our members or co-chairs who are here want to, or Kevin can inspire us to, want to throw out any lines of inquiry or wish list items for the next phase. But I'll start with you two.
Well, we definitely want to work with SSA on this and develop areas that, I mean, help to use AI in constructive ways, while at the same time kind of reinforcing and spelling out the guardrails to have the protections in place. And I think is sort of a question of whether we should go beyond Social Security and look at at other agencies, and that's something for the task force to discuss. But I think there's a lot of work in this area, and things are changing on a constant basis. I mean, I think Darren's made the point in the past that, I mean, AI is only getting more, it's only improving, that there's, and that the way it was a year ago is different than the way it is today. And
which makes the work, I think, even more timely and even more needed than even when the task force started its work, is sort of your point. And obviously with a lot of interest from incoming leadership at the Social Security Administration. So I'm glad that you two are willing to continue to support and facilitate this work. Chantel, anything you want to add for the next phase of work?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much to learn and absorb here, and even the task force was, again, bridging worlds and expertise. So, you know, just learning these lessons from other agencies who are also dealing with this in real time. None of the agencies who are doing this work that affect benefits should be doing it in isolation. And we already have many examples here that we can draw on. I'd love to dig in deeper to that and bring that to bear.
And I think I'll use this as a kind of our closing question and give everyone a chance to weigh in on that. Jen, any hopes or wishes you have for the next phase of the task force's work as one of its co-chairs?
Kind of building on what Chantel and Jack just said, I really am interested in thinking through how to make data sharing efficient for claimants and not problematic. I mean, right now we're seeing data sharing cause a lot of problems, a lot of concerns about privacy, yet there are real gains to be had. People do think that when they get a W-2, that means their income, not only that they've reported it to Social Security. So, I mean, I do think there's got to be a way to figure this out that is helpful. And I'm excited to be part of an effort to try to figure it out. But there are some serious concerns and risks that need to be considered too.
And Darren, I'll go to you next, because I think this will give you the chance to answer that questioner's question, because I think that segues really nicely into some of what you, I know, have said you want to bring into the task force's next phase.
Yeah, for sure. Just really with the question and you know, how we're able to submit effective applications. We never have applications, at least at the initial stage, that are sent back or flagged for being incomplete. You know, we've hired former SSA reps who've left the agency over the last 3 months, and they've become familiar with mindset applications because they're always clean and worked up if possible. And one thing that we do is when you get to the ALJ stage in front of a judge, and whether you win or lose, the judge writes a very in-depth reason as to why. And we have an AI model that reads it, uncovers the insights, and we try to implement those learnings to make sure that we avoid, you know, why the judge didn't award a claim or double down as to why. And you can either hire 10 analysts for every 1,000 claims you have to do that, or use AI. And obviously we choose to use AI for that. We know the optimal medical record page amount. We know the types of medications and dosages and the diagnosed illnesses for claims that do get accepted. Our AI reads our input fields as our case managers are filling out the information, and kind of pings our case manager to dig in and ask more questions in certain places in the application or data that we're requesting. We don't submit applications that will be a technical denial, meaning you or your spouse make too much money, or you're above SGA, or you somehow have stocks or something that you forgot about. We've got a very low percentage of technical denies, which I'm really, really proud about. And then there's different stages. At the recon stage, at the reconsideration stage, it asks you, very simple question: has anything about your disability changed or worsened since the initial application? And you can just say yes and include a medical record. But we do the work for the examiner. We don't just say yes. We generate a one-pager for them and give them all of the information that they need to hopefully say yes. So there's a lot of work that we put into making sure, from a technical and operations standpoint, that applications are effective.
And a lot of what you've innovated around as well, as I alluded to before, but I know is definitely something that task force is interested in learning from you, is how to simplify that application process, right? For claimants and for beneficiaries in a way that also may spill over to individuals and to advocates too, right? Helping people apply, and there may be lessons there for the agency to learn as it continues to explore what it looks like to get the SSI and Social Security disability insurance application process to be a lot simpler and streamlined for people, so that you don't have to be a lawyer to get disability benefits, right?
Sure.
Henry, I want to go to you next to help continue our closeout round here of what you're hoping that the task force's next phase of work will start to get into, given your role as one of the co-chairs of the group.
Sure. Really, I'm at the point of reiterating the important point of engagement. And I think having meetings with the agency at the leadership level, but importantly at the staff level, where they're going to be using the technology, and learning more about the oversight processes that they plan to put in place. If they're open to taking advice and establishing an outside entity, I think that would serve them well. So not to forecast too much of the work that I hope the task force can be doing, but I think there are a number of really constructive steps that we can offer to the agency in this process of really implementing, taking the right steps and implementing some good measures for oversight, which are identified in the report, and other people's work here today. So
I appreciate that, Henry, and definitely the Academy's hope as well. Kevin, any homework that you want to give us, or anything that you want the task force to be thinking about and watching for in this next phase? Very aware of a lot of the critiques that you have raised.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, look, I am also an anti-poverty advocate. I'm a legal aid lawyer. There are practical issues to be solved,
Yeah.
and you can work on practical issues with agencies around this stuff, but in a critical frame that goes beyond guardrails that might be weak or unenforceable, right? When poor people are involved, things don't work the same, right? Like commitments and ethics and things like this are so easily broken when it comes to poor people. So being practical but critical in a way that goes beyond default to nice guardrails. You need protection, you need safety, you need certain things off the table. And I think to that end, you have to be careful in this next phase about the efficiency uses, which Tim and Darren have alluded to and, sound pretty cool, right? Being used to justify the harmful uses. Because when you go beyond Social Security, when you go to Medicaid, SNAP, unemployment, these other benefit programs, you don't see this crawling up to the line of pre-decisional AI. You see decisional AI, and you see it ruin millions of people's lives at scale. So what the kind of AI hype folks are always pushing for is use cases that will justify the like good use cases that will allow the harmful use cases, even if they don't intend them to be harmful, into the equation. And I think you got to be really sharp in making sure that you're not doing the work of those who would end up either wittingly or unwittingly pushing for systems that would end up causing a lot of widespread harm.
Yeah, appreciate that, Kevin, and do appreciate your healthy criticism. It's a big part of why you've been an important thought partner for our work, and I'm glad that you're here today to bring that message. Tim, you're going to get to close us out with any hopes or wishes you have for the task force's not final, but next phase of work, and anything else you want to close us out with today.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of what I'd like to see us talk about next is similar to Henry, is like getting in the weeds on what does effective and ethical deployment look like with frontline staff. How do we make sure those sorts of calls, like call lines, don't happen? And if there is a good use case, we give them a real path to doing it well and effective deployment where we can really help people. And then the thing I'll leave you with is I think it's funny to be called an AI optimist, because I don't see myself as an optimist. I see myself as a pessimist, just differently. And the thing that I'm pessimistic about is I fully agree that our agencies, our state governments have a huge trust problem. But in addition to all the really terrible stuff that Kevin has covered and that legal aid really does good, important work on, the other thing that's breaking trust between people and agencies in these programs is that the customer service they receive from governments is far, far behind the customer service they receive from the private sector. And if we put in all of the stops to adopting technology that can help just the basic day-to-day of working with our government work effectively, I wouldn't say just efficiently, I would say efficiently and effectively. If we do that, then not just the services for poor people, but the services for everyone, every government service becomes a second-tier service. And there's nothing that's going to break trust in government more than if we can never get to a place where government serves people effectively in any program. And I mean, I do this work because I'm worried we're not going to get there. I'm worried that we're going to deploy bad AI systems. I'm worried that we're going to be scared to deploy good AI systems. And I'm worried that through the process of not doing any of that technologically, we are permanently in a deficit of public trust with our government institutions, which are the most important ones for serving the most vulnerable people in the country.
I can't think of a better note to close on. So just please join me in thanking Tim Shaw from the Aspen Institute's Financial Security Program, Henry Claypool from the American Association of People with Disabilities, and also one of the co-chairs of this task force, Jen Burdick from Community Legal Services, and also one of the co-chairs of this task force, Darren Webb with Mindset Care, and you can learn more about Mindset Care through the link that was shared in the chat, and also Kevin DeLibon from Tectonic Justice, and in the room with me, our fearless principal investigators who took on a lot. You bit off a lot, you guys, when you took this on with us, but I'm excited to continue to work with both of you in this next phase, Chantel Boyens and Jack Smulligan with the Urban Institute. So we're gonna, with that, wrap things up today, but stay tuned for lots more as this task force begins its next phase of work. And just a big thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thanks, everyone.